Chapter 1. The petitioned court smelled of iron and old stone. Alara stood at the threshold of the vast hall, her breath shallow, her fingers white knuckled around the fold of her cloak. Candlelight flickered from iron sconces mounted along walls so ancient they seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The floor beneath her boots was polished black marble, veined with what might have been silver or bone. She had walked 3 miles through falling snow to reach this place. Her mother had 2 weeks left, maybe less. The physicians had tried everything mortal medicine could offer. Now only one option remained, whispered in back streets and condemned by priests, the vampire courts. The man, the creature who ruled this house, could grant miracles. For a price, step forward. The voice came from the far end of the hall, low and precise, cutting through the silence like a blade through silk. Alara's heart kicked against her ribs. She forced her feet to move, each step echoing too loudly in the cavernous space. The throne was not gold or jeweled. It was carved from a single piece of black wood, twisted and gnarled like something pulled from a nightmare forest. And seated upon it, perfectly still, was the vampire king himself, Lord Cashin Ashford. She had heard the stories, ancient beyond reckoning, ruthless in war, the architect of the blood accords that had ended the last great vampire conflict 70 years ago. Humans whispered his name with the same reverence they gave to plagues and hurricanes, things that could not be stopped, only survived. He looked younger than she'd expected, 30 perhaps, though she knew that meant nothing. His face was pale as winter moonlight, sharp-featured and aristocratic, framed by black hair that fell just past his collar. He wore dark clothing, fitted and austere, with no adornment save a silver ring on his left hand. His eyes were the color of smoke before a storm. Those eyes settled on her now with the weight of a physical touch. "You are Alara Thorne," he said. Not a question. "Yes, my lord." Her voice came out steadier than she'd hoped. "You have come to petition the House of Ashford for clemency." Again, not a question. He already knew. Of course he did. Nothing happened in this city without his knowledge. "My mother is dying," Alara said, lifting her chin. "The wasting sickness. The physicians say there's nothing more they can do. And you believe I can help. I believe you have the power to help. Whether you will." She swallowed. "That's why I'm here." Something flickered in his expression, so brief she might have imagined it. Amusement, perhaps. Or irritation. "Do you know what you're asking?" Cashin leaned forward slightly, the movement deliberate and controlled. "Vampire blood is not a cure-all elixir sold in apothecaries. It is bound by laws older than your bloodline. To grant what you seek would require a blood oath, a debt." "I understand. Do you?" His gaze sharpened. "A blood oath is not a contract you can negotiate or break. It binds you to this house, to me. You would owe me a favor of my choosing, called in at my discretion. There is no time limit, no escape clause. You could live your entire mortal life waiting for the debt to come due, or I could demand payment tomorrow." Alara's throat tightened, but she didn't look away. "What would you demand?" "That," Cashin said softly, "is the nature of the oath. I do not know yet what I will need from you, but when I call, you will come, you will obey." Without question, the words settled over her like a shroud. She thought of her mother's trembling hands, the way she'd smiled last week, pretending the pain wasn't eating her alive from the inside. The empty chair at the dinner table that used to hold her father, dead 5 years now in a factory accident that never should have happened. Alara had already lost so much. She couldn't lose her mother too. "I accept," she said. Cashin's eyes narrowed. "You should take time to consider." "I accept," she repeated, louder this time. "Whatever the cost. Save her." For a long moment, he said nothing. He simply watched her, as if trying to see through her skin to the truth beneath. Then slowly, he rose from his throne. He moved like smoke given form, silent, fluid, unnatural. Within 3 steps he stood before her, close enough that she could see the faint tracery of veins beneath his pale skin, the way his chest didn't rise with breath. "Give me your hand," he said. Alara hesitated only a heartbeat before extending her right hand. Cashin took it in his own. His touch was cool, not cold, but definitely not human warm. His fingers were long, elegant, and impossibly strong. He turned her palm upward. With his other hand, he produced a small silver knife from somewhere within his coat. "This will hurt," he warned. Before she could brace herself, he drew the blade across her palm. Pain flared white hot. Blood welled immediately, dark and bright in the candlelight. Cashin made an identical cut on his own hand without flinching. Then he pressed his palm to hers, The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, a rush of heat and cold at once, threading through her veins like liquid starlight. She gasped. Her knees buckled, but Cashin caught her with his free hand, holding her upright. "Steady," he murmured. The oath must set. She felt it then, something taking root deep inside her chest, a tether she couldn't see but could feel with absolute certainty. It wrapped around her heart like a vine, binding her to this man, this creature, this ancient power that should terrify her. When he finally released her hand, the cut had already begun to close. "It is done," Cashin said quietly. "Your mother will live. And you, Alara Thorne, now belong to the House of Ashford." Chapter 2. The summoning. 3 weeks passed in blessed silence. Alara's mother recovered with a speed that left the physicians baffled and the neighbors whispering. Color returned to her cheeks. Her hands steadied. Within days, she was walking unaided. Within 2 weeks, she'd returned to her seamstress work, threading needles with the precision she'd lost months ago. Alara told her nothing of the blood oath. What good would the truth do? Her mother would only worry, and worry had nearly killed her once already. Life returned to its quiet rhythm. Alara worked her shifts at the lending library, shelving books and mending torn pages. She walked home through lamplit streets, bought bread from the corner baker, listened to her mother hum old songs while mending clothes by the fire. She almost let herself believe the debt would never be called. Then the letter came. It arrived on a Tuesday evening, slipped under their door while Alara was heating soup for dinner. No knock, no messenger, just cream-colored paper sealed with black wax, pressed with a sigil she recognized immediately, a raven's wing crossed with a thorn branch, the mark of House Ashford. Her hands shook as she broke the seal. "Miss Thorne, your presence is required at Ashford Manor tonight at the 9th bell. Come alone. The debt begins. C.A.No explanation. No details. Just the summons she'd known would come eventually, though she'd hoped for more time. What is it, dear?" Her mother called from the other room. Alara folded the letter quickly. Nothing. Just a notice from the library about extended hours. The lie tasted bitter, but necessary. She left the house at 8:30, telling her mother she'd been asked to work late. The walk to Ashford Manor took her beyond the edges of the city she knew, past the markets and tenements, into the district where old money lived behind iron gates and high stone walls. The manor itself stood at the end of a tree-lined drive, a sprawling Gothic structure of dark stone and peaked towers. Windows glowed with warm light, but something about it felt cold, as if the building itself were merely tolerating the fire within its walls. The front door opened before she could knock. A pale woman in servant's dress stood in the doorway, her expression blank. "Miss Thorne, you're expected. Follow me." Alara stepped inside, and the warmth she'd seen from outside proved illusory. The air was cool, almost damp, scented with old wood and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet that made her stomach tighten. The servant led her through hallways lined with portraits of severe-looking men and women, all with those same smoke-gray eyes, past drawing rooms filled with furniture shrouded in dust covers, up a curving staircase to the second floor. They stopped before a heavy oak door. "He's inside," the servant said, and disappeared back down the hallway without another word. Alara knocked. "Enter." Cashin's voice was just as she remembered, low, controlled, utterly without warmth. She pushed the door open and stepped into what appeared to be a study. Bookshelves lined 3 walls, floor to ceiling, crammed with volumes in languages she couldn't read. A fire burned in the hearth, casting shifting shadows. Cashin stood by the window, silhouetted against the night. He turned as she entered. He wore different clothes than he'd worn in court, simpler, though still dark. A shirt with the collar open, revealing the pale column of his throat. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. He looked tired, she thought, then immediately dismissed the idea as ridiculous. "Vampires didn't get tired. You came," he said. "I gave my word, so you did." He moved toward the desk, where a decanter of dark liquid sat beside 2 glasses. He poured 1 glass and held it out to her. "Wine. It's safe." Alara took it, though she didn't drink. "Why did you summon me?" "Because I have need of you." He poured a second glass for himself, though she suspected it wasn't wine he was drinking. "Are you familiar with the structure of vampire houses?" "Only what everyone knows. There are 7 great houses. Yours is the oldest. 6 houses now," Cashin corrected quietly. "House Merrick was destroyed 2 decades ago, but yes, 6 houses, each with territories, blood rights, and ancient laws that govern our existence." He took a slow sip from his glass. For 70 years, we've maintained peace through the blood accords. But that peace is fracturing. Alara's grip tightened on her glass. What does this have to do with me? House Draven has been testing boundaries. Small violations at first, feeding without consent, crossing territorial lines. But 3 nights ago, they killed a human woman under my protection in the city square. A direct challenge. The room suddenly felt colder. War is coming, Cashin continued. And in war, houses need leverage. Information. House Draven has a new advisor, a human woman named Margot Voss. She came to them voluntarily. Traded secrets about human governance and military movements in exchange for immortality. Understanding dawned slowly. Horribly. You want me to spy for you. I want you to survive what's coming. Cashin set down his glass. If House Draven wins this conflict, they will burn this city to ash. They have no interest in the accords, in coexistence. They believe humans exist only to serve or feed. His gray eyes locked on hers. I need someone who can move through both worlds. Someone unremarkable enough to go unnoticed. Someone bound to me by oath, whom I can trust. You don't trust me, Alara said flatly. You own me. There's a difference. Something sharp flashed across his face. Perhaps, but ownership goes both ways. Now, the oath binds me to protect you as much as it binds you to serve me. If you're discovered, if House Draven takes you, he paused. I would be compelled to retrieve you, at any cost. How comforting. It wasn't meant to be. He moved closer, and she resisted the urge to step back. This isn't a request, Miss Thorne. This is the debt. You will stay here, in this manor, where I can ensure your safety. You will learn what I need you to learn. And when the time comes, you will do exactly as I say. Alara's heart hammered. For how long? Until the war ends. Or until we're both dead. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Finally, Alara raised the glass to her lips and drank. The wine burned going down. When do I start? Chapter 3. The Rules of Night. Alara was given a room on the 3rd floor. East Wing.it was larger than her entire home. High ceilings, mullioned windows overlooking dark gardens, a 4-poster bed draped in heavy velvet. A wardrobe stood against one wall, already filled with clothes she hadn't brought. Dresses in deep jewel tones, wool cloaks, undergarments in her exact size. How did you? She started. We've been watching you since you left the court, said the pale servant woman who'd led her upstairs. Her name was Iris, and her voice held no inflection whatsoever. Lord Cashin is thorough. The words should have frightened Alara. Instead, they just made her angry. Iris left her alone with instructions to rest. Dinner, human food, would be brought at 10. Lord Cashin would see her at midnight. Alara didn't rest. She paced the room, examining every corner, like a prisoner studying her cell. The windows didn't lock from the inside. The door had no bolt. She was 3 stories up, with no convenient trellis, no drainpipe to climb down. Not a prisoner, she reminded herself. An indentured servant. Completely different. At midnight exactly, a knock came at her door. Cashin stood in the hallway, looking precisely as composed as he had hours earlier. He'd changed into a dark coat, formal but not ostentatious. His gray eyes swept over her, assessing. Come, he said. We begin. He led her through the manor's maze of corridors, down 2 flights of stairs, through a gallery filled with marble sculptures that seemed to watch them pass. They descended further still, into parts of the house that felt older. The stone walls rougher, the air cooler and damp. Finally, they reached a heavy iron door. Cashin produced a key from his coat and unlocked it. What I'm about to show you cannot leave this manor. Do you understand? Yes. He pushed the door open. Beyond lay a library unlike anything Alara had ever seen. It stretched impossibly deep into the earth, shelf after shelf carved directly into the stone walls, spiraling down in a great circle. Books, scrolls, maps, thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands. Candlelight flickered from sconces that seemed to ignite themselves as they entered. The house archive, Cashin said quietly. Every blood oath, every treaty, every documented law of our kind for the past 800 years. Alara stared. Why are you showing me this? Because you cannot serve me effectively if you're ignorant. He moved down the nearest aisle, his fingers trailing along leather spines. The war that's coming isn't just about territory or power. It's about the fundamental laws that govern vampire existence. If you're going to survive it, you need to understand what we are. He pulled a volume from the shelf and handed it to her. The leather was ancient, cracked with age. She opened it carefully. The text inside was handwritten in precise script. The ink faded to brown. The doctrine of consent, Cashin said. Written in 1-4-7, it established the first law. A vampire cannot feed from an unwilling human. Not without invoking blood madness, a deterioration of the mind that eventually destroys us. Alara looked up sharply. You need permission to feed? Always. His expression was unreadable. Without consent, the blood turns poisonous in our veins. Slowly, over years, it destroys our reason. We become what your stories claim we are, mindless monsters. Then why would house Draven? Because they believe the law is a weakness imposed by cowards. Cashin's voice hardened. They think if enough vampires embrace the madness together, they can transcend it, become something greater. He took the book back, returning it to the shelf. They're wrong, but they'll burn the world trying to prove otherwise. He pulled another volume, then another, stacking them in Alara's arms. Books on house lineages, blood oath mechanics, territorial rights, feeding protocols. You'll read these, he said. All of them. You need to know how we think, how we move, the rules we live by and the ones we break. I'm a librarian, not a scholar of vampire law. You're whatever I need you to be. He met her eyes. That's the oath you swore. The words stung because they were true. Cashin led her to a reading table near the center of the archive. A lamp burned there, steady and bright. He gestured for her to sit. We'll start with basics, he said, pulling out the chair across from her. Ask me what you need to know. Alara set down the stack of books. Her mind raced with 1,000 questions, but she chose the most practical. How many vampires are in this house? 43, including myself. House Draven has 62. They've been recruiting aggressively. Do you sleep? We enter dormancy during daylight hours. Not sleep as you know it, closer to a trance. We're vulnerable then, aware, but unable to move. He paused. That's why manners like this exist. Protection during day hours. Can you die? Yes. Sunlight, beheading, a stake through the heart if it's left long enough for us to bleed out. Fire, though we're harder to burn than humans. His tone remained clinical, as if discussing the weather. We're stronger and faster than mortals, but we're not invincible. Alara absorbed this, filing each fact away. And the blood oath between us, what exactly does it do? Something shifted in his expression. It binds your life force to mine. I can sense your location, your emotional state, whether you're in danger. The stronger the emotion, the clearer the signal. Her stomach dropped. You can feel what I'm feeling? Not thoughts, just impressions, fear, pain, anger. He leaned back slightly. It works both ways, though the connection is stronger from you to me. I'm older. The bond settles differently in ancient blood, so right now, you're frightened but trying to hide it. Angry at me for controlling your life. Worried about your mother. His eyes held hers. And curious, despite yourself. Heat rose in Alara's cheeks. Having her emotions laid bare felt violating, like being stripped naked under cold light. I hate this, she said quietly. I know. For the first time, something like sympathy crossed his face. But hate won't release you from the oath. Only I can do that, and I won't. Not until this is over. And if I refuse to help you. Cashin stood, moving toward the door. Then the oath compels you anyway, and you suffer for the resistance. I've seen it before. It's not pleasant. He paused at the threshold. Read tonight. Tomorrow, your real education begins. He left her alone in the archive, surrounded by centuries of vampire law and the weight of her own choices. Alara opened the first book and began to read. Chapter 4. Small Truths. Days fell into a pattern that felt both surreal and grimly routine. Alara woke at sunset. The manor kept vampire hours now and breakfasted alone in her room. Iris brought her food without speaking. Bread, cheese, fruit, occasionally meat that Alara suspected was rarer than she'd prefer. Then came hours in the archive, reading until her eyes ached and her head swam. With blood lineages and territorial disputes from centuries past, Cashin appeared each night at midnight exactly. He never asked if she'd read the assigned materials. He simply began questioning her, testing her knowledge with the precision of a scholar examining a dissertation. When she answered incorrectly, he corrected her without condescension. When she argued a point, he listened and occasionally conceded she might be right. It was the arguments that surprised her most. The doctrine of consent is hypocritical, Alara said on the fourth night, closing the book she'd been reading with more force than necessary. It claims to protect humans, but it still allows vampires to feed from us. Just because we say yes doesn't make it equal. You hold all the power. Cashin looked up from the map he'd been studying. You think consent is meaningless when power is unbalanced. I think calling it consent when the alternative is being drained against your will isn't much of a choice. Fair. He set down the map. But consider, before the doctrine, vampires took what they wanted. Humans were livestock. The law didn't end feeding, you're right about that. But it forced us to see you as thinking beings whose will mattered. It was a beginning, not a solution. A beginning that still leaves us as food. Yes, he met her eyes. I won't pretend otherwise. We are predators. You are prey. The doctrine simply demands we acknowledge the moral weight of that reality. The honesty startled her. She'd expected justification, defense. Instead, he gave her uncomfortable truth. Do you feed from humans? The question escaped before she could stop it. Cashin was quiet for a long moment. Yes. Unwilling ones? Never. His voice hardened. I've lived too long to risk madness. And I've seen what it does, the deterioration, the loss of self. I won't become that, but you've killed. It wasn't a question. She'd read enough history to know what he'd been. A warlord, a strategist who'd orchestrated battles that left hundreds dead. Yes, he said simply. I've killed. In war, in self-defense, in the enforcement of house law. I won't apologize for surviving. He paused. But I don't kill when I feed. The two don't need to be connected. Alara studied him, this ancient creature who commanded a house, who'd lived through centuries. She couldn't imagine. Who'd summoned her here and bound her with blood magic. He looked so human in this moment, lit by candlelight, weariness showing in the set of his shoulders. How old are you? She asked quietly. 347 years. The number was staggering. What was it like? The beginning? Something painful flickered across his face. Violent, confusing, lonely. He stood, moving to the shelf, where he pulled down a slender journal. I was turned during a border war. My maker was a battlefield scavenger. He turned dying soldiers and left them to either adapt or perish. Most perished. He handed her the journal. She opened it carefully. The handwriting inside was jagged, uneven, nothing like his current precise script. I wrote that during my first decade, Cashin said, when I was still trying to understand what I'd become. Alara read a passage at random. Killed a man tonight for his blood. Didn't mean to. Couldn't stop. The hunger is worse than any pain I knew in life. God help me. I think I'm damned. She looked up. You think you're damned? I did then. Now. He took the journal back, closing it gently. Now I think damnation is less about what you are and more about what you choose to do with it. Is that why you created the blood accords? Redemption? No, his smile was bitter. I created the accords because endless war was tedious and wasteful. Redemption was never the goal. Survival was. They stood in silence, surrounded by centuries of vampire law and the ghosts of old wars. Why are you telling me this? Alara asked. You could just order me to obey. The oath would force me. I could, Cashin agreed. But compliance born from compulsion is fragile. It breaks under pressure. He met her eyes. I need you to understand what we're facing. Not because I'm kind, but because you're more useful if you choose this. I didn't choose this. No, but you can choose how you survive it. The words settled between them like a challenge. The next evening, Cashin didn't come to the archive. Iris appeared instead, carrying a bundle of dark clothing. Lord Cashin requests your presence in the eastern courtyard. Wear these. The clothes were practical trousers, a fitted shirt, boots meant for running. Alara changed quickly, her heart already racing. The eastern courtyard proved to be a training ground. Cashin stood in the center, coat discarded, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. Two other vampires flanked him, a tall man with copper hair and a woman with sharp features and darker skin. This is Marcus and Delphine, Cashin said when Alara approached. They'll be teaching you to fight. I'm not a fighter. You are now. Cashin nodded to Marcus, who tossed Alara a wooden practice blade. She caught it clumsily. House Draven won't negotiate. They'll kill you if they discover what you are to me. You need to be able to defend yourself. For how long? Until you're competent enough not to die in the first 30 seconds, Marcus grinned. We'll start simple. Show me how you'd hold a knife if someone attacked you. Alara gripped the practice blade like she'd seen in street fights, blade forward, arm extended. Delphine moved so fast Alara barely saw it. One moment she was standing 3 feet away. The next, she disarmed Alara and pressed the wooden blade to her throat. Wrong. Delphine said pleasantly. Again, they trained for 2 hours. Alara learned she had terrible instincts, slow reflexes, and a tendency to telegraph her movements. She also learned that vampires, when teaching, showed no mercy. By the time Cashin called a halt, she was bruised, sweating, and furious. Better, he said, which felt like an insult, given how badly she'd performed. I hate you, Alara gasped, bent over with hands on her knees. I know. He offered her a canteen of water. Drink. We train again tomorrow night. She took the water, meeting his eyes over the rim as she drank, and despite everything, the oath, the fear, the invasion of her life, she felt something unexpected stir in her chest. Not trust. Not yet. But perhaps the first thread of it. Chapter 5. The enemy Arivist letter arrived on the 9th day. Alara was in the archive, transcribing notes on house territorial boundaries, when Cashin appeared in the doorway. His face was carefully blank, which she'd learned meant something was very wrong. Come with me, he said. Now, she followed him through the manor to his private study. 3 other vampires waited inside, Marcus, Delphine, and an older woman with silver-streaked hair whom Alara hadn't met before. This is Vivian, Cashin said shortly. My second in command. Vivian's eyes were the palest blue Alara had ever seen, and they studied her with unsettling intensity. So this is your pet human. She's under my protection, Cashin said, his voice cold. Show respect. Vivian's lips twitched, but she inclined her head slightly toward Alara. Cashin moved to his desk and picked up a letter. The paper was black, sealed with red wax. Even from across the room, Alara could see the sigil pressed into it, a coiled serpent with fangs bared. House Draven, they've requested a parley, Cashin said. 3 nights from now. Neutral ground, the old cathedral at the city's edge. Lord Draven himself will attend. It's a trap, Marcus said flatly. Of course it's a trap. Cashin set the letter down. But refusing would be seen as weakness. And we need to know what they're planning. Let me go with you. Vivian said. No. If they're planning an ambush, I need you here to protect the house. Cashin's eyes moved to Alara. She'll come with me. The room went silent. Absolutely not, Delphine said. She's barely trained. She'd be a liability. She's the liability I'm choosing. Cashin's tone left no room for argument. House Draven knows I claimed a blood oath recently. They'll expect me to bring proof of my assets. A human bound to me shows strength, not weakness, or it shows them exactly how to hurt you, Vivian said quietly. The words hung in the air like poison. Cashin's jaw tightened. The decision is made. Marcus, Delphine, you'll come as guards but stay outside the cathedral. Visible, but not threatening. He looked at Alara. You'll stay by my side at all times. Say nothing unless I tell you to. If violence starts, you run. Understood? Alara's mouth was dry. You're using me as bait. I'm using you as a statement. His eyes held hers. That I'm willing to bring what matters into danger. That I'm not afraid. Even if I am? Especially then. He moved closer, his voice dropping. Fear is honest. They'll smell it on you, and they'll believe you're exactly what you appear to be, a human servant, nothing more. That's our advantage. And if they decide to kill me to prove a point, then they break every law of parley that's held for 3 centuries, and I'll have justification to burn their house to ashes. His expression was stone. But it won't come to that. You can't promise that. No, he admitted. I can't. The 3 nights before the parley passed like a fever dream. Cashin drilled her relentlessly on vampire etiquette, how to bow to a house lord, where to stand, when to lower her eyes. He taught her the formal phrases of blood oath servitude, the tone to use, the posture that conveyed submission without weakness. You're not a slave, he said during one particularly frustrating lesson. But you need to appear deferential. House Draven respects power and dominance. If you seem too independent, they'll wonder what I'm hiding. So I'm supposed to act like I belong to you. You do belong to me. His voice was matter of fact. The oath makes that true. But you belong the way a knight belongs, to a lord through service, not ownership. House Draven won't understand that distinction. Let them misunderstand. She hated how much sense it made. The night before the parley, Cashin found her in the eastern courtyard. She'd been practicing the knife work Delphine taught her, stabbing at shadows and trying not to think about what tomorrow would bring. You should rest, he said. I can't sleep. Neither can I. He stepped into the courtyard, his coat billowing slightly in the cold wind. Though for different reasons, Alara lowered the practice blade. Are you worried? I'm always worried when dealing with House Draven. Lord Draven is unpredictable, brilliant in some ways, unhinged in others. He sees the world as a game where he makes the rules. And you? I see it as a war where the rules are all that keep us from annihilation. Cashin moved to the courtyard wall, looking out over the dark gardens. 70 years ago, when I proposed the blood accords, Draven was the last to sign. He did it only because every other house had already agreed, and refusal would have isolated him. He's resented me ever since. Why did you push for the accords? Because I was tired. The admission came quietly, almost surprising him. Tired of war. Tired of watching cities burn. Tired of burying vampires I'd known for centuries over territory disputes that meant nothing. He glanced at her. You think us immortal monsters. But immortality doesn't protect you from exhaustion. From the weight of too many years. Alara moved closer. Do you regret it? Becoming vampire? Every day. His smile was sad. And not at all. I've seen things you can't imagine, wonders and horrors both. I've loved and lost more times than I can count. I've built things that lasted centuries and watched them crumble. He paused. But I'm still here. Still fighting. That has to mean something. Does it? I don't know anymore. He turned to face her fully. But tomorrow, when we walk into that cathedral, I need you to believe it does. Believe I'm worth following. Because if you doubt, if you hesitate, they'll see it. And we'll both pay the price. Alara met his eyes. Gray like storm clouds, ancient and weary, and still burning with something she couldn't name. I'll play my part, she said. That's not what I'm asking. Then what are you asking? Cashin reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand, the same hand he'd cut to seal the oath. His thumb traced the faint scar there. Trust me, he said quietly. Just for tomorrow. Just enough. The blood oath pulls between them. A warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with magic. I'll try, Alara whispered. It was the best she could offer, and for now, it would have to be enough. Chapter 6. The cathedral. The old cathedral loomed against the night sky like a broken tooth. Alara sat rigid in the carriage beside Cashin, her hands folded tightly in her lap to hide their trembling. She wore a gown he'd chosen for her, deep burgundy silk that whispered when she moved, with a high collar fastened by a silver clasp bearing the Ashford sigil. Her hair had been pinned up by Iris, exposing the vulnerable line of her neck, a claim, a brand, a message written in fashion for those who knew how to read it. Breathe, Cashin murmured beside her. He wore formal attire, black coat, silver threaded vest, his house ring prominent on his hand. He looked every inch the ancient lord, powerful, controlled, untouchable. I'm breathing. You're panicking. I can feel it through the oath. Damn the oath. Damn him for being right. The carriage stopped. Marcus opened the door from outside, his hand resting conspicuously on the sword at his hip. Delphine stood opposite, her stance relaxed but ready. Cashin descended first, then turned and offered Alara his hand. She took it, acutely aware of how her mortal warmth contrasted with his cool skin. He helped her down with old-fashioned courtesy, then tucked her hand into the crook of his arm. Stay close, he said, too quiet for anyone else to hear. Remember what I taught you. The cathedral doors stood open. Candlelight flickered from within, casting dancing shadows across the stone steps. They climbed together, Marcus and Delphine taking positions flanking the entrance as instructed. Inside, the cathedral was magnificent and ruined in equal measure. The ceiling soared overhead. Sections collapsed to reveal stars beyond. Stained glass windows, those that remained, cast colored light across cracked marble floors. Pews lay broken and scattered like the ribs of some great beast. At the far end, beneath what remained of the altar, stood 3 figures. Lord Draven was instantly recognizable. Tall and broad-shouldered, with hair the color of dark honey, and eyes like molten gold. He wore crimson, an arrogant choice, the color of fresh blood, and his smile when he saw them was all teeth. Beside him stood a severe woman in black, her expression carved from ice. And next to her, incongruous and unsettling, stood a human woman in a gown of midnight blue, Margot Voss, the advisor. The traitor, depending on who you asked. Cashin Ashford, Draven called out, his voice echoing through the ruined space. How punctual. I'd almost forgotten what a stickler you are for propriety. Cashin's grip on Alara's arm tightened fractionally, a warning. He led her down the center aisle, their footsteps unnaturally loud in the silence. They stopped 10 feet from the altar, close enough to speak clearly, far enough to react if violence started. Lord Draven, Cashin said, his tone neutral. You requested this parley. I'm here to listen. How gracious. Draven's golden eyes slid to Alara, and she felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch. And you've brought a pet. How domestic of you. Heat crept up Alara's neck, but she kept her eyes lowered, as Cashin had taught her. Subservient, unimportant. I bring what's mine, Cashin said coolly. As is my right, indeed. Draven stepped closer, circling them slowly, like a predator assessing prey. A blood oath, I'm told. Fresh sealed. Tell me, little human, what did he promise you in exchange for your service? The question was directed at her. Alara's heart hammered, but she remembered Cashin's instructions. Say nothing unless given permission. She remained silent. Answer him, Cashin said quietly. Alara lifted her eyes just enough to see Draven's face. He saved my mother's life, my lord. I owe him everything. Everything. Draven savored the word. How deliciously futile. He glanced at Cashin. You always did have a taste for collecting broken things. I collect what serves me, Cashin replied. As you collect Margot Voss, I see. The human woman stepped forward at the mention of her name. She was beautiful in a severe way, sharp features, dark hair, eyes that calculated constantly. She curtsied to Cashin with perfect form. Lord Ashford. A pleasure. Is it? Cashin's voice could have frozen fire. You've traded human loyalty for vampire promises. I wonder if you'll find the bargain worth it when Draven tires of you. I'll find immortality worth any price, Margot said smoothly. Unlike your little pet, I didn't come as a supplicant. I came as a partner. A partner. Cashin's laugh was cold. Is that what he calls you? Enough pleasantries, Draven interrupted. I asked you here for a reason, Ashford. The blood accords are dying. Everyone knows it. Your precious peace has made us weak, dependent on human consent, hobbled by laws that treat mortals as equals, when they're clearly not. The accords have kept us from tearing each other apart for 70 years. No, they've kept you comfortable while the world changed around you. Draven's expression hardened. Humans multiply like insects. They develop weapons that could kill us even in dormancy. They grow bold because we've shown them we can be caged by treaties and contracts. He spread his hands. I'm offering you a chance to stand with me. Rewrite the accords. Take back our rightful place as apex predators. By feeding without consent? By killing indiscriminately? Cashin's voice was ice. You'd doom us all to blood madness within a generation, or we'd evolve beyond such weaknesses. There is no evolution past madness. Only deterioration. Draven's smile sharpened. Then we disagree on fundamental philosophy. How unfortunate. The woman in black stepped forward. House Draven offers you one more chance, Lord Ashford. Join us willingly, or be swept aside when the old world falls. I decline, Cashin said flatly. I thought you might. Draven glanced at Alara again, his gaze lingering. Tell me, does your pet know what you really are? The things you've done? The villages you've burned? The families you've slaughtered in your glorious wars? Alara's breath caught. Cashin's hand on her arm was the only thing keeping her grounded. She knows enough, Cashin said quietly. Does she? Draven moved closer to Alara, close enough that she could smell something metallic and wrong on him. Did he tell you about the massacre at Thornfield? 200 humans killed in a single night. Men, women, children all burned alive in their homes because they harbored refugees from a rival house. That was war, Cashin said, his voice tight. It was genocide. Draven's eyes never left Alara's, and he commanded it personally. The words hit like physical blows. Alara felt sick, but she couldn't look away from Draven's golden stare. The difference between him and me, Draven continued softly, is that I'm honest about what I am. He pretends the accords have redeemed him. But blood doesn't wash away, little human. It only soaks deeper. Enough. Cashin's voice cracked like a whip. This parley is over. So it is. Draven stepped back, smile widening. Think on my offer, Ashford. You have until the next new moon. After that, he shrugged. Well, let's just say the accords won't protect you anymore. Chapter 7. The breaking point. They didn't speak on the ride back. Cashin sat across from Alara in the carriage, his face turned toward the window, watching the dark city pass. His jaw was tight, his hands folded with unnatural stillness. The oath thrummed between them. She could feel his tension. Something cold and sharp-edged that might have been anger or shame, or both. Marcus and Delphine rode ahead on horseback. Silent sentries cutting through the night. Alara's mind churned with Draven's words. The massacre at Thornfield. 200 humans killed in a single night. She wanted to ask, wanted to demand the truth, but something in Cashin's stillness warned her to wait. They arrived at the manor as midnight bells tolled. Cashin descended from the carriage without offering his hand this time, striding toward the entrance with Marcus and Delphine flanking him. Ilara followed at a distance, feeling suddenly like an outsider again. Inside, Vivian waited in the entrance hall. Well, war, Cashin said shortly. New moon. 3 weeks. Vivian's expression didn't change. Expected. I'll begin preparations. Her pale eyes shifted to Ilara. The human should be secured. If Draven knows about her, she stays with me. Cashin's tone brooked no argument. No one touches her. Pass the word to every member of this house. Something passed between them, some silent communication Ilara couldn't read. Finally, Vivian nodded. As you command. Cashin turned and headed for the stairs. After a moment's hesitation, Ilara followed. She caught up with him outside his private study. Is it true? He stopped, his hand on the door. Is what true? Thornfield. The massacre. His shoulders tensed. Go to your room, Ilara. No, the word surprised her as much as it did him. You said I needed to understand what we're facing. You've drilled me on vampire law and house politics and fighting tactics. But you never told me about Thornfield. Cashin turned slowly. His face was carefully blank again, that mask he wore when emotions ran too deep. What do you want me to say? The truth. Did you kill 200 people? Burn them alive? Yes. The single word hung between them like a death sentence. Ilara's stomach turned. Children? Some. His voice was flat, utterly without inflection. I told you I'd killed. Did you think it was always clean? Always justified? I thought she didn't know what she'd thought. That his violence had been limited to other vampires, perhaps. That he'd only killed in self-defense. Comfortable lies she'd told herself. Why? Because they sheltered refugees from House Merrick, the house Draven destroyed 20 years ago. Those refugees were planning an assassination attempt on me. Intelligence said they were hiding in Thornfield. He moved to the sideboard and poured himself a drink with steady hands. I gave the village 3 days to surrender the conspirators. They refused. So you burned them all. I made an example. He downed the drink in one swallow. In war, mercy is often mistaken for weakness. I needed the other houses to fear defying me. I needed the Merrick refugees to understand that harboring them meant death. He set the glass down hard enough that it cracked. It worked. Within a month, the remaining Merrick sympathizers surrendered. The war ended. At what cost? Everything. The word came out raw. My humanity, if I ever had any. The respect of vampires who thought I'd gone too far. My sleep, for decades afterward. He finally looked at her. Do you want me to apologize? To say I regret it? I can't. I did what I believed was necessary to end a war that had already claimed thousands. If I had it to do again. He paused. I don't know. And that uncertainty haunts me more than the act itself. Ilara felt tears prick her eyes, though she couldn't say if they were for the dead of Thornfield or for the broken thing standing before her. You told me damnation was about what you choose to do. What does that make you? Damned. His smile was bitter. I've known that for a very long time. She should leave. Should turn and walk away from this creature who'd slaughtered innocents, and felt uncertain about it rather than sorry. The oath bound her body, but her heart was still her own. Instead, she stepped closer. Why did you really bring me to that parley? The question seemed to catch him off guard. I told you. To show strength. No, she shook her head. You could have brought any vampire in your house. Marcus, Delphine, Vivian, any of them would have been more impressive than a human servant. But you brought me. She searched his face. Why? Cashin was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because Draven would have tried to hurt anyone else I brought. Challenged them, provoked them, forced a conflict. But you. He paused. You were beneath his notice. Safe in your perceived weakness. I'm not weak. No, you're not. His gray eyes held hers. You walked into that cathedral knowing you might die. You held your ground when Draven tried to intimidate you. You're standing here now, demanding truth from a creature who could kill you without effort. Something shifted in his expression. You're braver than most vampires I know. The compliment felt like a wound and a gift at once. I'm terrified, Ilara admitted. Of the war, of Draven, of you sometimes. Good. Fear keeps you careful. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the faint lines around his eyes, age that had been frozen in place for centuries. But don't let it paralyze you. In 3 weeks, when the new moon comes, this house will be under siege. You'll need to choose. Choose what? Whether to stay or run. I can send you away before it starts, give you money, papers, safe passage to another city where House Draven's reach doesn't extend. The oath binds you, but I can release you from it. Let you go free. Alara's heart hammered. And if I stay? Then you fight with us. And you might die. His hand lifted slowly, hovering near her cheek, but not quite touching. I won't force you into a war you didn't choose. I chose when I walked into your court and swore that oath. You chose to save your mother, not to die in a vampire war. Maybe they're the same thing now. She caught his hand before he could pull it away, holding it between both of hers. His skin was cool, but not cold, solid and real. You said the oath binds you to protect me. Does that work both ways? Understanding dawned in his eyes. Alara, I'm not leaving. The words came firm, surprising her with their certainty. Not because the oath compels me, because... She struggled to name the feeling. Because you've been honest with me, even when the truth is ugly. Because you're trying to prevent the exact kind of slaughter you committed at Thornfield. Because she stopped, the next words too dangerous to speak. Because somewhere in these dark halls, I've started to see you as something more than a monster. Cashin's fingers tightened around hers. You're a fool, probably. She managed a shaky smile. But I'm your fool. Until this is over. For the first time since the cathedral, something like hope crossed his face. Then we'd better make sure you survive it, he said quietly. Chapter 8. The Seagoth new moon arrived with unseasonable fog. Alara woke if the twilight emergence from day sleep could be called waking to an unnatural stillness. The manner felt wrong, the air too thick, too quiet. She dressed quickly in the clothes laid out by Iris. Dark trousers, a reinforced leather vest, boots with good grip. Combat clothes. Tonight, the war came to them. She found Cashin in the main hall, surrounded by his house. 43 vampires. All told some ancient and powerful like Vivian. Others young by vampire standards, barely a century old. They stood in clusters, checking weapons, speaking in low voices. The tension was palpable. Cashin stood at the center, dressed in black, with a sword belted at his hip. He looked every inch the warlord she'd read about in those histories, cold, calculating, ready. Their eyes met across the room. The oath pulsed. Stay alive, please. She felt his fear for her like a brand against her chest. Marcus appeared at her elbow, pressing a knife into her hand. Short blade like we practiced. Aim for the throat or heart if you have to use it. Don't hesitate. How many are coming? Alara asked. Best guess? 60 vampires, maybe more. Draven's entire house plus whatever allies he's recruited. Marcus's expression was grim. We're outnumbered, but we have defensive position. This manor has stood for 200 years. Its walls are spelled old magic, blood words that make it difficult for uninvited vampires to enter. Difficult. Not impossible. Nothing's impossible if you're willing to pay the price. Vivian's voice cut through the hall. Positions. North and east walls, reports of movement in the tree line. The vampires dispersed with military precision, each to their assigned post. Alara started to follow, but Cashin's hand caught her arm. You stay in the archive, he said. It's the most secure location. Reinforced door. Only one entrance. If they breach the manor, you bar yourself inside and hide. I'm not hiding while you fight. You're not dying for a war that isn't yours. His grip tightened. Please, I need to know you're safe. The please broke her resistance. She nodded. He pulled her close suddenly, his forehead pressing against hers in a gesture that felt ancient and desperate. If I fall, if Draven kills me, the oath breaks. You run. Do you understand? You take the passage behind the eastern bookshelf in the archive. It leads to the catacombs and out beyond the walls. Don't look back. Cashin, promise me. I promise. He released her, stepping back. For just a moment, his mask slipped, and she saw the weight of 300 years in his eyes, all the losses, all the battles, all the people he'd failed to protect. Then the moment passed. The warlord returned. Go, he said. Now, Alara ran. The archive felt different in the pre-battle stillness. The candles had been extinguished, too much risk of fire, leaving only the moonlight filtering through high windows. She found the reinforced door Marcus had mentioned, checked that it could be barred from inside, then positioned herself where she could see the entrance. The knife felt too light in her hand. Inadequate. Ridiculous. She waited. The first sounds of battle came as muffled crashes from above. Breaking glass. Shouts in languages she didn't recognize. Then closer, the thunder of footsteps on the stairs, the clash of steel on steel, the blood oath burned in her chest. She could feel Cashin fighting, his focus sharp as a blade, his fear for his house bleeding through. And underneath it, directed at her, stay hidden. Stay safe. An explosion rocked the manor. Dust rained from the ceiling. Alara's hands shook, but she held her position. Then she heard it, a scream, distinctly human, coming from somewhere above. Her blood ran cold. There were no other humans in the manor, unless the servants, Iris and the others, the day staff who maintained the manor. Were they still here? Had they been evacuated? Another scream, cut short. Alara's feet moved before her mind caught up. She burst from the archive, knife in hand, following the sounds upward, through corridors lined with fighting vampires too fast for her to process, just blurs of movement and the wet sound of tearing flesh. She pressed herself against walls, staying small, staying unnoticed. She found the servant quarters on the 3rd floor. The door hung off its hinges. Inside, 3 human servants cowered in the corner. Iris and 2 others Alara recognized. And standing over them, golden eyes gleaming with hunger, was a vampire. She didn't know. House Draven colors. He turned as she entered, his smile widening. Another little lamb. How convenient. Alara didn't think, didn't plan. She lunged, using the technique Delphine had drilled into her low and fast, targeting the vulnerable spots. The knife caught him in the throat. Not deep enough, not fatal, but enough to make him stagger back, hissing, "Run." Alara shouted at the servants. The eastern stairwell, go. Iris grabbed the others and bolted. The vampire recovered quickly, yanking the knife from his throat. Blood too dark, too thick poured from the wound, but he was already healing. "Stupid girl," he snarled, advancing. "Did you think that would kill me?" Alara backed toward the door, frantically searching for anything she could use as a weapon. Her hand closed on a candlestick, brass, heavy. She swung it as he lunged. It connected with his temple. He went down hard. She didn't wait to see if he'd get up. She ran, heart hammering, following the path the servants had taken. Behind her, she heard the vampire's roar of rage, the sound of pursuit. The eastern stairwell appeared ahead. She practically fell down it, taking stairs 3 at a time. At the bottom, strong hands caught her. Cashin, he was bloodied, his shirt torn, a cut healing slowly on his cheek. But his eyes blazed with something beyond anger when he saw her. "I told you to hide," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "There were servants, I don't care." He pulled her close, then thrust her behind him as the Draven vampire appeared at the top of the stairs. "You could have died, but I didn't." Cashin looked at her, then really looked, and something shifted in his expression. Not anger anymore. Something deeper, more dangerous. "No," he said softly. "You didn't." Then he turned to face the vampire descending the stairs. And Alara saw the warlord truly unleashed. It was over in seconds. Brutal, efficient, final. When Cashin turned back to her, blood spattered his face, and his eyes held something wild. "Stay with me." This time, she didn't argue. They fought their way back to the main hall together. And Alara discovered something she'd never known about herself. When survival demanded it, she could be fierce. Chapter 9. After the storm, dawn came as a mercy. The fog lifted with first light, revealing the true cost of the night. Bodies, vampire and human, both lay scattered across the manor grounds. The eastern wall had collapsed in places. Windows gaped like wounds. Blood, dark and rust-colored in the growing light, stained the marble floors. House Draven had retreated an hour before dawn, their numbers too depleted to continue the assault. They'd lost 23 vampires. House Ashford had lost 11. Alara sat on the steps of the main entrance, exhausted beyond words. Her clothes were torn and bloodied, not all of it hers. Her hands shook with residual adrenaline. The knife Marcus had given her was gone, lost somewhere in the chaos. She'd killed tonight. Not the vampire on the stairs. Cashin had finished him. But another later, when a Draven soldier had cornered one of the younger Ashford vampires. She'd found a broken chair leg and driven it through his back while he fed, piercing his heart. He'd turned to ash in seconds. She'd vomited afterward. Then kept fighting. The servants had survived. Iris and the others were in the kitchens now, being tended by Delphine. Marcus was organizing cleanup crews. Vivian was securing the perimeter, making sure no Draven stragglers remained hidden, and Cashin stood at the edge of the grounds, staring toward the east, where the sun would rise fully in minutes. His back was to her, shoulders rigid with tension. He hadn't entered dormancy, yet pushing the limits of what his ancient body could endure. Alara forced herself to stand and walked to him on unsteady legs. "You need to sleep," she said quietly. "Soon." His voice was rough, strained. "I need to see it. Need to know it's over." "It's not over. Draven will come again. Not for a while. He lost too many tonight. He'll need to recruit. Cashin's hands clenched at his sides. "We bought time. That's all." Alara stood beside him, watching the sky lighten from black to deep purple to pale gold. In the growing light, she could see the true extent of his injuries, cuts that hadn't fully healed. Burns on his hands from silver weapons, a deep gash across his ribs. "You're hurt," she said. "I'll heal during dormancy." "We all will." He finally turned to look at her, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. "You disobeyed me. I saved 3 human lives. You could have died." The words came out jagged, raw. "Do you understand that? When I felt you leave the archive, when I sensed the danger you were in," he stopped, struggling for control. "I nearly abandoned my position. Nearly left my house defenseless to reach you. But you didn't, because Marcus got to you first. If he hadn't," Cashin's jaw tightened. "The oath binds me to protect you. But tonight I learned it goes deeper than obligation. If you had died, he didn't finish. Didn't need to." The sun broke over the horizon, golden and merciless. Cashin's face contorted with pain. His skin began to smoke faintly where the light touched it. "Inside," Alara said urgently, grabbing his arm. "Now." He let her pull him toward the manor, stumbling slightly as dormancy began to take hold. They made it through the entrance just as his legs gave out. Alara caught him, or tried to. He was too heavy. They went down together on the blood-stained marble. "Your room," Cashin managed, his words slurring. "Need to secure." "Shh, I've got you." Alara looked up frantically. "Marcus." "Vivian." Marcus appeared within seconds, took in the situation, and lifted Cashin with practiced ease. "His chambers are this way. Come on." They carried him through the manor to the 2nd floor, to rooms Alara had never entered. Marcus kicked open the door to reveal a windowless chamber, dark and cool. A bed stood against one wall, simple, utilitarian. This was where he spent his vulnerable daylight hours. Marcus laid him on the bed. Cashin's eyes were already closing, dormancy claiming him whether he willed it or not. "He'll be completely unresponsive until sunset," Marcus said. "His body will heal, but he won't wake for anything. Fire attack, nothing. I'll stay with him," Alara said. Marcus studied her for a long moment. "You know what you're saying? Guarding him during dormancy it's a position of absolute trust. Usually only blood-bonded mates or house seconds are permitted." "I know." Something shifted in Marcus's expression. "Respect, perhaps, or understanding." He nodded. "I'll post guards outside the door. Bar it from inside. If anyone tries to enter that you don't recognize, there's a panic bell by the bed. Ring it, and every vampire in this house will come running." He left, closing the door behind him. Alara barred it as instructed, then turned to look at the room properly. It was sparse, no decorations, no personal touches. Just the bed, a wardrobe, a small table with a water basin, a soldier's quarters. Cashin lay utterly still, his breathing so shallow she had to watch carefully to see his chest move. The injuries from battle looked worse now in the lamplight, the gash across his ribs especially. She found clean cloth and water in the adjoining washroom and set about cleaning his wounds. He didn't stir, didn't respond, even when she had to press hard to remove dried blood. It felt surreal, tending to this ancient creature who'd fought with inhuman speed and strength just hours ago. As she worked, she noticed details she'd never been close enough to see before. The faint scars that even vampire healing couldn't fully erase, marks from old battles, perhaps, or injuries so severe they'd left permanent traces. The way his hair fell across his forehead, making him look younger, almost vulnerable. The way her chest ached when she looked at him. "You're an idiot," she told him softly, knowing he couldn't hear. "I'm an idiot. This is impossible and doomed, and probably the worst decision I've ever made." But she stayed. She pulled a chair close to the bed and sat. The knife Marcus had returned to her, resting across her lap. Outside, she could hear the sounds of the house recovering, repairs beginning. the wounded being tended, the dead being mourned, and here, in this dark room, she kept vigil over a vampire who should have been her enemy, but had somehow become something else entirely. Hours passed. Her eyes grew heavy despite her determination to stay alert. She fought sleep, knowing she needed to remain watchful. But exhaustion won eventually. She woke to find evening light filtering under the door and Cashin's gray eyes watching her. "You stayed," he said quietly. "I promised I would." She sat up straighter, her back protesting. "How do you feel?" "Better." He pushed himself up slowly, testing his movements. The injuries had healed, leaving only faint pink lines that would fade to nothing within hours. The house? Standing. 11 dead. The rest are healing. He closed his eyes briefly, grief crossing his face. Then he looked at her again, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Come here," he said. She moved to sit beside him on the bed, close enough to feel the cool air around him. He reached out slowly, his hand cupping her cheek with surprising gentleness. "I can't lose you," he whispered. "I know I shouldn't care. I know it's weakness. But watching you fight last night, seeing you risk yourself," his thumb traced her cheekbone. "You've become something I didn't expect. Something I don't have a name for." Alara's heart thundered. "What are we doing?" "Something foolish. Something dangerous." His smile was sad. "Something I should have prevented. But you didn't." "No," he leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers, like he'd done before the battle. "I didn't." Chapter 10. The Shoiseth. Weeks after the siege settled into an uneasy rhythm, House Draven regrouped beyond the city, their threat constant but distant. Cashin received reports daily, scouts tracking movements, informants whispering rumors. Draven was recruiting, they said, reaching out to lesser houses, those who'd never signed the blood accords, who saw civilization as weakness. War was still coming, but not today. Alara found herself changing in ways she couldn't have predicted. The terror that had kept her awake those first nights faded into something sharper, more focused. She trained with Marcus and Delphine until her muscles ached, until the knife became an extension of her hand. She studied vampire law until she could recite house hierarchies and blood oath precedents from memory. And she spent her nights with Cashin, not always in his chambers, though they'd fallen into the habit of her keeping watch during his dormancy, but in the archive, discussing strategy. In the courtyard, where he'd begun teaching her himself not just fighting, but vampire weaknesses, how to survive if she was caught alone. In quiet moments, stolen between preparations for a war that loomed like a storm on the horizon. "Tell me about your father," Cashin said one evening. They sat in his study, the fire burning low. He'd been reviewing supply manifests. She'd been mending a tear in her training clothes. The domestic normalcy of it struck her as absurd. "Why?" she asked. "Because I know everything about you, from the blood oath, your fears, your immediate emotions. But I don't know the small things. What made you who you are?" Alara set down her mending. He worked in a textile factory, died when a machine malfunction trapped him, and by the time they got him out, she swallowed. He bled to death while they tried to fetch a doctor. "I was 17, and your mother never remarried." "No?" She said she'd had her great love. Everything else would be settling. Alara smiled sadly. "She nearly died waiting for him in the next life. Would have, if I hadn't, come to me," Cashin finished. "Do you regret it?" "The oath?" She considered the question honestly. "I regret losing my freedom. I don't regret saving her. Or..." She met his eyes. What came after? Something heated in his gaze. "Alara, I know what you're going to say. That this can't work. That you're immortal and I'm not. That caring for me is dangerous for both of us. All of that is true. I don't care." The words came out fierce. "I've spent my whole life being careful, being small and safe and insignificant. And then you happened. This happened. I'm not going back to who I was before." Cashin stood, crossing to where she sat. He pulled her up to face him, his hands framing her face. "If you stay in my world, you will watch everyone you love die. Your mother eventually, any friends you have. You'll age while I remain as I am. 30 years from now, I'll look exactly like this. While I'm an old woman." She placed her hands over his. "I know, I've thought about it, all of it, and still. She pulled his hands down but didn't let go. "Unless you're about to tell me you don't feel this, that I'm just a convenient human servant and nothing more." His control cracked. "You know that's not true. The oath lets you feel what I feel. You know exactly how much you've come to mean to me. Then say it. Put words to it. Why? What good will words do when the reality is impossible? Because I need to hear them. Her voice broke. Because in 3 weeks or 3 months, or however long we have before Draven comes again, I need to know this was real. That I didn't imagine it. Cashin closed his eyes. When he opened them, they burned with centuries of loneliness and longing. I love you. God help me. I love you in ways I didn't think I could still feel. You walk into my darkness without flinching. You've seen the worst of me and you're still here. You make me believe that maybe damnation isn't permanent. That maybe, his voice roughened. That maybe I'm not beyond redemption. Alara's eyes filled with tears. I love you too. Even though you're impossible and controlling and you've done terrible things. Even though you're a 300-year-old vampire who could kill me without trying. She laughed wetly. I love you anyway. He kissed her then finally, after weeks of careful distance and denied desire. His lips were cool against hers, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. She tasted restraint in that kiss, and hunger, and something like desperation. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, well, she was breathing hard. He was simply undone. He rested his forehead against hers. I can give you immortality, he said quietly. Turn you, make you vampire. We'd have centuries together instead of decades. The offer hung between them like a jewel and a poison. Both. Alara pulled back to look at him. Is that what you want? I want you to live. His hands tightened on her waist. I want to not watch you wither and die while I remain unchanged. He stopped. But it has to be your choice. Not the oath compelling you. Not me pressuring you. Your choice freely made. She thought of eternal night. Of never seeing another sunrise, of feeding from humans, of the weight of centuries, of becoming something other than what she was. She thought of her mother, who would grow old and die while Alara remained young. She thought of Cashin, alone in his darkness, and the way he looked at her like she was sunlight itself. I need time, she said finally. This isn't a decision I can make tonight. Not with everything that's happening. Relief crossed his face that she hadn't said no, she realized. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. Promise me something, Alara said. When this war with Draven is over, if we both survive, promise me we'll talk about this again. Really talk about it. What it would mean. What I'd be giving up. What I'd gain. I promise. She kissed him again, softer this time. A promise and a question both. Come to bed, she whispered against his lips. Not for that, not yet. But I don't want to be alone tonight. He carried her to his chambers, and they lay together in the darkness, her warmth pressed against his coolness, his arms wrapped around her like a vow. Outside, the world prepared for war. But here, in this moment, they had peace, and it was enough. 3 weeks later, riders came with news. House Draven was marching. Not just vampires, a coalition of 3 lesser houses, blood-mad and hungry for destruction. The final battle was coming, but House Ashford would not face it alone. 4 of the 6 great houses, horrified by Draven's violations, pledged their support. The blood accords would hold or break forever. Alara stood beside Cashin as the houses gathered, his blood-sworn human who'd become something more. She wore leather armor now, carried silver-edged weapons, and met vampire gazes without flinching. When the battle came, it was brutal. Cashin fought like the warlord of old, merciless, strategic, devastating. And Alara fought beside him, mortal and fierce and alive. House Draven fell at the cost of hundreds of vampire lives. Lord Draven himself died by Cashin's hand, golden eyes dimming as his head rolled across blood-soaked ground. The blood accords survived. House Ashford stood, and in the aftermath, as dawn approached and Alara kept vigil once more over Cashin's dormant form, she made her choice. Turn me, she would tell him when he woke. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday, when I've lived enough mortal life to feel complete. Turn me. Give me centuries. Give me you. The girl who'd walked into a vampire king's court to beg for her mother's life had indeed changed his heart forever, and in doing so, she'd found her own.